Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Gelper, and I'm a Senior Relationship Manager at Klingenstein Fields Advisors, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Money Plus What Equals Happiness. I'm pleased to be joined by our speaker, Joel Treisman, who will share his insights on the relationship between wealth and well-being, applying the principles of positive psychology. Joel will explore the existential question, does money make you happier? As we approach the holiday season, when many of you will be spending time with family after the tumultuous and life-altering pandemic, we find ourselves more introspective and focused on what truly matters in our lives. Today's webinar will serve as a guide as we think about the question of wealth in relation to our well-being. During the call, you could submit your questions via the chat function on the bottom of the screen, or you can email them to mildred.palo@klingenstein.com. That's MILDRED.PALO@klingenstein.com. We'll reserve about 10 minutes for questions at the end of the webinar. And if we aren't able to get to your question, we'll make sure that we follow up with each of you individually. And now I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Joel Treisman. Joel is a scholar and practitioner in applied positive psychology and the founder of the consulting and coaching firm From Wealth to Wisdom. Through Joel's work with high net worth individuals, families, entrepreneurs, businesses, and non-for-profit organizations, he integrates insights about the psychology of wealth, human flourishing, and family dynamics. Joel is a certified organizational and individual coach. His clients have included high net worth individuals and families, corporate and nonprofit leaders, and entrepreneurs. Joel holds a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, an MBA from the Yale School of Management, and a BA from Stanford University. Joel is also the father of 3 daughters, and he takes pride in continually embarrassing them by telling dad jokes and constantly striking up conversations with strangers. Joel, it's a pleasure to have you join us today to share your valuable insights on how we can all think about happiness and being more fulfilled. And with that, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that I'm excited about and love to share with people. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So let's see if all works according to plan. Okay, I think is that good to go?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, looks good.
Terrific, great. Okay, so yes, that's my ugly mug there, and we just talked about this. I'll just say I like to talk about the 3 F's, the way I think about it, of family, finance, and flourishing. So I'll mention that a couple of times, and something that's not in the biographical information that Alyssa shared, but I think is important. Let's see, I just want to make sure that there we go. Couple of additional biographical pieces that I think have informed my thinking on the 3 F's. One, I come from a family of multi-generational wealth. I actually can't tell you, I'm not G2, 3, 4, or 5. We could trace wealth back in varying degrees, pretty far back in my family. So in essence, I grew up a native in the land of wealth, unlike a lot of the people that I met during my dozen years working with an organization called Tiger 21, which is a peer learning organization for high net worth investors. Most of the Tiger 21 members are wealth creators, if you will. They're immigrants to the land of wealth. And there's a very large gap in psychology and emotions and thinking about money between the immigrant mentality and the native mentality. As Alyssa mentioned, I do coaching and consulting, family facilitation. I have a long and checkered past doing social entrepreneurship, advertising, marketing, management consulting until about 20 years ago when I became certified as an individual and organizational coach. I worked at Tiger 21 for about a dozen years, and it was that experience in part that led me to leave and go back and do a deep dive into the science of well-being, which was my master's learning experience at Penn in their applied positive psych program. And then beyond all that, I'm just overeducated, so I'll move on from this. So that's enough about me. Now I'm going to be using something called Mentimeter, which is an online real-time polling tool. And I would encourage everybody on the Zoom to give it a try. It's pretty straightforward. And but by no means should you feel pressured if you feel like it's something you don't want to take part in. But it's a great way to see what people are thinking as I go through my slides. So what I'd encourage you to do is probably the easiest thing is on your phone, or if you have a second screen there, is to go to this website, Menti, MENTI.com. And once you get there, it'll ask you to enter a code. And all you need to do is, don't worry about the space, is just enter the code you see here, 5887-2403. And when you do that, and I'll give everybody a moment to get into the website and enter the code, you should pop up momentarily to a very simple questionnaire type of screen. And I'll be going back and forth to some Menti questions over the course of the next 50 minutes, 45 minutes or so. So, so hopefully you've had a chance to go to menti.com. You've entered the code 5887-2403. And you should now see a question on the screen that says, where are you located? And this is an open-ended question. And as people answer, you should see the screen populate with your answers. So New York City, New York, Marlton, New Jersey, East Coast, Westchester. Terrific. It's great to see. I'll take this as a good sign that people have figured out how to answer the questions. So Wilton, Connecticut, by the way, should have said I'm here in Westport, Connecticut. So a couple of other Connecticut people. Good to see you. And thanks to somebody who's taking time out of the Advanced Estate Planning Conference in Fort Lauderdale to tune in. So appreciate your participation. So we'll give you a second to fill those out. And then I'm going to move on to our next slide. And I think you have time to complete this. If I move on to the next slide, I believe if you haven't answered the prior question, I think you do that, and then you'll see the following question, which is, which age bracket do you fall into? By the way, I'm in the 55 to 64 also. And I put the under 25 in there as an option. I'll be surprised if we have anybody under 25, but that'd be a nice surprise. It looks like I'm in good company in the 55 to 64 group. I think this is just helpful, both for me as I'm going along, but also in just thinking about, you'll see one another's answers to some of the other questions, and keeping in mind, that we have a preponderance of people 45 to 74, and a few participants on either end. And I think some of the answers you'll see people give, and some of your reactions to what I present will be different depending on your stage in life. Maybe not necessarily in years, but your stage in life, parenting, grandparenting, marriage, not marriage, that kind of stuff. So, so moving right along, and feel free to continue answering if you haven't done so, those first couple of questions. I mentioned my experience at Tiger 21 was formative in that I borrowed this graph from Carl Richards, who's a friend. If you ever have a chance to go to his website, behaviorgap.com, he does these great, very simple visual depictions of sometimes complicated concepts. And in this case, the idea is simply that every money conversation that I found Tiger 21 members and families that I've coached in the midst of always had an emotional context. And it's as much as we'd all like to think about our financial discussions, investment discussions, we could talk about efficient frontiers and, ideal asset allocation strategies. It's pretty hard to separate those money discussions, those money decisions from the emotional cloud within which it exists. So keep in mind as we go through this that this takes place in whether it's budgeting, whether it's marriage, raising kids, decisions about what to buy, how to spend money, jobs to take. There's always an emotional, and I would actually add psychological element to these conversations and decisions. I've also been, beyond my experience with Tiger 21, I've been influenced considerably by the work of Marty Seligman. Some of you may know that name. He's really the founder of the modern study of positive psychology, and eminently quotable. This is actually just a couple of weeks ago. I was at the annual conference down at UPenn of the alums of the Positive Psych program. Marty says that the skills of becoming happy turn out to be almost entirely different from the skills of not being sad, not being anxious, or not being angry. So I do want to tell you just a little bit about positive psychology. It really is a science, and it's the study of well-being. It's a deep dive into what it means to live the good life. And psychologists have for a long time talked about interventions to help people who are, dysfunctional and unhappy become a little happier. Positive psychology is really the study of people who are already doing pretty well, but want to do better. If you think about people who are a 4 in terms of their well-being and they want to be an 8. And so that has really informed my thinking, because a lot of the people and families I work with are really quite successful already, but they want to flourish. They want to thrive individually as families, the companies they own. And I think that that has driven a lot of what you're going to see over the next 40 minutes or so. So just a couple of things to keep in mind in looking at the science of well-being. Chris Peterson, unfortunately, passed away a number of years ago. One of the big names in positive psychology said that it's the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. There are definitions of happiness, subjective well-being, flourishing. They're all similar, but I would say, keeping in mind, and sometimes I use happiness as a sort of a catch-all phrase, but it's not all about being happy all the time. Well-being is about more than that. It's a broader concept, and a lot of it comes down to feeling satisfied with life. And it's a subjective sense. There are objective measures, but well-being is a subjective perception of how happy you are with the way your life is going. One way of thinking about this, and I could do a whole presentation on this, but I do want to point you, if you're interested, to taking a look at some of Seligman's work in his book, Flourish. He developed a conceptual framework for well-being. He calls it PERMA, and it consists of, and each of these can be measured, positive emotions, engagement, if you've ever heard of the term flow, being engaged in what you're doing, positive relationships, having a sense of meaning in life, and accomplishment or achievement, and feeling that you're achieving something in your life. Subsequent research and thinking has added multiple elements to this, one of which I think that's important and I would say belongs there is V for vitality, or H for health, which isn't physical health, which isn't included in his initial PERMA theory. When I did the deep dive into positive psychology, I was also really interested in understanding the connection to wealth. And these are just a few of the books that are on the on the shelves behind me, the color-coded shelves behind me. It's interesting. There really isn't much written about wealth and families through the lens of positive psychology. So what I'm hoping to share with you is a different lens from that used by a lot of people who do write about wealth and families and inheritance and raising kids and the psychology of money. So as I mentioned, my interest has been in the 3 F's, family, flourishing, and finance. In other words, how are money and well-being related? How is the psychology of wealth and positive psychology, how are they connected? What does it mean to be financially well? People talk about financial well-being, but I think financial wellness is a broader concept that incorporates your psychology and your emotion. And then a question maybe some of you have wondered about: why are so many wealthy, seemingly successful people not as happy as one might think? For my Penn master's program, I had hoped to do a study of those 3 F's. Fortunately, my advisor told me I was trying to drink the ocean, so I narrowed it down and did a deep dive into 2 of them. I looked at family flourishing. It turns out there's a lot of positive psychology work done on individuals, but not as much done on family well-being. So I created a dashboard of family flourishing, and hopefully in the years to come, you'll hear more about that, essentially bringing together the different ways one might think about and measure a family's subjective well-being along the different dimensions like PERMA. Which brings us to this question: does money equal happiness? We could be done if the answer is yes. Maybe we all just, click end Zoom and go off and make some more money so that we'll be happier. But if not, the question is, what are the variables that could be missing? What if the equation is money plus variable 1 plus variable 2 and so on equal happiness? What are the missing pieces? So back to, before I talk a little bit about my perspective, back to Mentimeter, I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on those missing variables. So going back to your other screen or your other window on your device, I would be interested in hearing and seeing your thoughts on money plus what equals happiness. And I've given you room to add, and hopefully you'll hit the enter button after each one, but you can answer up to 5 questions as to what you think might be missing. Time, perspective, gratitude, health. Great. Peace of mind, love, connection. I have a sense that some of you have been reading ahead on my slides, which I love, but these are one of the great things about the world of positive psychology is these are all things that positive psychologists study and do really good academic research in. A reason to wake up, that is a great answer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Japanese idea of ikigai. Mindfulness, passion, acceptance, empowerment, engagement, hope. Great. Sanity, very important. Stability, purpose, intellectual stimulation, responsibility, Interests. Yeah, there's a whole lot of work done on interests and the importance of having hobbies, interestingly, and fascinating work on how having hobbies promotes, forget about the money part of it, just promotes well-being and satisfaction. Partnership, acceptance, calm, friendship. Oh, friendship is a huge topic for discussion. Companionship. So please keep adding to these. I'm going to move on mostly just in the interest of time, because I realize I've got more stuff here than I'll be able to cover, but please keep adding your missing variables. Those of you who've inputted your 5 variables, I'm just curious your perspective on this question. I have 3 curves here. The relationship between money and happiness. Curve A illustrates the idea that as wealth increases, happiness does too. B is the idea that, you know, the more money you have, the happier you are up to a point, and then you could keep adding money, whether it's income or wealth, and it flattens out. Your happiness flattens out. And then curve C is this upside down U, that the more money you get, the more problems, and maybe that undercuts happiness. And so far, we have a majority in the B, in the flattening of the curve. So please keep adding your thoughts to this. And I will tell you that to a certain extent, all of you are right, but it's not really about right and wrong. I think it's a very personal curve for people. And there are a lot of it depends elements to this. So I'm going to move along. Thank you for answering these. You all are doing great on Mentimeter. I just want to give you a lot of positive feedback. And it's super helpful to see your current thinking on all of this. So keep answering those questions. Your input is really valuable. I'll just say there are a lot of studies on this topic, and many of them conflict, not surprisingly. What's the, I think it was Truman who said he wished he could have a one-armed economist because he got so tired of his economic advisor saying, well, on the one hand, this, and on the other hand, that. And I think that's a little bit like the researchers, psychology researchers. On the one hand, more money might increase happiness no matter what, and on the other hand, maybe not. And so, you know, I'm kind of interested in what happens to people, for instance, who win lotteries. And the interesting podcast, this guy Timothy Schultz has a podcast called Lottery Dreams and Fortune. He interviews lottery winners and his perspective through all of his interviews. And he also is a $28 million Powerball winner in '99. And he says, I think that once the exhilaration of winning wears off, you still may be happier than you were before, but it's not like you're every day going to be jumping up and down saying, I won the lottery, because the exhilaration wears off and you are who you are at the end. Saw a recent article that said, on the other hand, there's a small study said that for those of you who think that line flattens off, there was an older study that said it was about 75,000. There's a new one that says, okay, earning 123,000 a year is where that line flattens off. Some people say there's no cap. And of course, happiness, as I said, is maybe not really the right thing that we should be measuring, because there are positive and negative feelings along the way. So I wish I could give you a really clear answer to that, but it seems like all 3 of those answers might be right, depending on which study you look at. I mentioned earlier, talking about family, I grew up in the land of wealth, not in a obnoxious way, but I grew up in multi-generational wealth. My mom's side of the family, a descendant of the Lehman family. My family, they love to write autobiographies, which is great. So I've had a chance to get into the mindset of some of my family members. But it turns out the family that you grow up in actually has an impact on how you view wealth and how happy you are, and how that money comes to you. I come from a large family. I like this quote: "I shook my family tree and a bunch of nuts fell out." That was a family gathering just before the pandemic. And it turns out there are 5 groups of my family represented here. My grandfather had 4 siblings, and each one of those family trees from my grandfather's generation down have extremely different levels of wealth, perceptions of wealth, attitudes, emotions, psychology. So I really do believe that family plays a huge role in your attitudes and behaviors, and therefore your feelings about wealth. One of the issues is when it comes down to family is stress. It's often the elephant in the room. Before I show some of the stats on that, I'm just curious, for those of you who are here with us, back to Mentimeter, if you could share a couple of your responses to these questions about your own stress level when it comes to money or wealth. At a high level, thinking about your own stress level on a sliding scale, do you feel closer to the no stress or the high stress? And then when you look at your spouse and you look at your kids, and if you have parents who are still with us, you think about your parents' stress level. I would say it's probably a good thing that kids are not feeling too much stress, but you might argue maybe that's not good. Maybe kids should be feeling a little more stress about it. Interesting that your own stress level and your spouse's stress level are sort of in the same realm. And these are obviously, my questions here are not scientific, but just to get if you will, a sense of the room. So I'm glad to see the average anyway is somewhere closer to the middle of the range here. Now, this is not a all-inclusive list, obviously, but I'm wondering what, at least of these 6 factors, if you were to rank them in order, which seem to be more significant to you in contributing to your money stress? Just thinking about yourself, not about your spouse or your kids or parents in this case, but just for you. Which of these seems to be driving that stress level? We've got quality, frequency of money talks. We've got concern about your kids, comparing your lifestyle to others, wondering if you're spending too much, feeling that maybe you're not in control as much as you want to be of your money, and wondering if maybe you could be a more effective, better investor. So it's fun to watch all of these populate, just because it's like a horse race, and seeing where people land on this. But interestingly, so concern about kids and their financial future and questions about spending seem to be neck and neck for first place. The quality and the frequency of money talks, and interesting questions about your investment acumen and whether you could be a better investor. Oh, wait, feeling I'm not in control has edged that one out. So please do keep adding these, and we're going to hit on some of these, I would say most of them, in the coming couple of minutes. So as father of three, I have to say what you see on the screen is certainly true of how I feel much of the time. So, when you think about family and the kinds of conversations we have, and how do we get to be literate about finances and about money? Just like a very short anecdote. When I was growing up, and I mentioned I grew up as a native in the land of wealth, and so did my mom. But I think about my mom. I saw a bumper sticker once that said, "How can I be overdrawn? I still have more checks." And that's, to me, that was my mom. I'll tell you, and not to criticize, but just as a reality, when I was growing up, I remember multiple times our power was cut off. Why? Because mom didn't pay the bills. Wasn't that we didn't have the money. There was an element of literacy and responsibility, and there was something about that responsibility which just did not drive her behavior. Just an interesting data point. And I think we're not always rational beings when it comes to money. We don't always do what's in our best interest. And we get our messages and our lessons from the people we grow up with and around. It turns out that the good news is that when taking a look at the influence, the good and bad, of different people and settings on our financial behaviors, family is generally seen as a good influence. And despite our power being cut off sometimes, I would say the same thing is true of my upbringing. But family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, not surprisingly, and maybe this is even more so today because this goes back a few years, social media is a pretty bad influence on our spending attitudes and behaviors. And it's only become more so as it's pervaded really every part of our lives, every waking minute, having a phone, seeing social influencers, seeing, particularly for kids, seeing these lifestyles of people that they want to emulate all the time. Yet, what's going on? I mean, the family is a good influence, but we don't seem to talk about it. There seems to be this taboo in families about money, and there are some people who debate this and don't buy into it. But there was one study done a while back that looked at, and many of you are concerned about your kids' financial future. This study found that more than half of the explanation for ineffective or unsuccessful transfers of wealth could be explained by a breakdown in trust and communication within a family. Not so much the failure to prepare kids, the financial literacy or the tax issues or bad financial decisions, but it came down to the trust between generations and effective communications about money and wealth. So does that ring true? Well, interestingly, those of you who talked about feeling stressed by money, majority of people in polls, and this is just one, but many polls say money is a significant source of stress above work, above concerns about the economy, above family responsibilities, even health concerns, that money is stressful. And despite this huge source of stress, a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about it in families. In fact, in many families, it's simply taboo. It's just not talked about. It turns out when you take a look at couples that are in great marriages versus those who are not doing so great or in crisis, there's a correlation, hard to say causation, but certainly a correlation in terms of the quality of the marriage and the conversations that couples have about money. So once again, we're not always doing what is in our best interest, but it's difficult. It is a source of taboo and discomfort, and which gets me to this question of financial wellness and the behaviors that come from my dive into positive psychology. So I would say, this is my definition, that financial wellness is a bigger concept than simply the well-being that comes from knowing you have enough money to meet your needs, that you're in control of your finances, that you can absorb the unexpected economic and financial shocks and setbacks. There's this broader idea. It's not just your financial health, but it's the other aspects of your well-being as a human being. So ramping up your financial wellness involves doing more than just working on your money, making more of it. So here are 11 research-based strategies that have come mostly from the world of positive psychology on boosting your financial wellness and forgetting about the financial and money side, just flourishing as a family, frankly, wealthy or not. Number one, some of you said that you weren't sure you felt as in control of your financial lives as you wished. Well, it turns out that taking control of your financial behavior, having a sense of control and confidence, which psychologists call self-efficacy, is a huge part of feeling a greater sense of well-being, feeling that you're in control. Psychologists also talk about an internal locus of control, meaning a sense that you control your destiny, that you're not just at the whims of other people or broader macroeconomic events and trends. So thinking about how to grab control, whether that's in your spending, whether that's in mindfully making decisions about where your money goes, making mindful decisions about spending versus saving, and so forth. Number two, social comparison is what psychologists call it. But we talk about social media. There are endless opportunities every day to compare our lives and lifestyles with other people. I took this picture at a wedding, so this is not my car, but it is a Rolls Royce, and we see all place, Instagram and TikTok and everywhere else, people who are traveling to great places and have the private planes and whatever. Recognizing in yourself when you're seeing that and comparing what you have and the way you're living to what you're seeing and the negative effect of that social comparison. Having meaning and purpose in life. This is a simple diagram of a Japanese concept of purpose. They call it ikigai, which is the intersection of what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can be compensated for. And they say that ikigai is the middle of that, of this Venn diagram. So thinking about your wealth and what you're investing it in, and looking for ways to invest it in your passions, your purpose, the things that give you meaning. Back to what Marty Seligman talks about in PERMA, the M in PERMA is meaning. Number four is expressing gratitude. There are a lot of studies on the benefits of gratitude, exercises, practicing gratitude, and part of that is savoring, taking time out to savor. There's evidence that doing this rewires your brain and creates a greater sense of contentment and well-being. Savoring, by the way, can take place both in three temporal modes. Savoring something can take place in anticipation, if you think about a vacation. Before you go, you're planning and your anticipation and looking forward to it. Savoring can be simply appreciating where you are when you're on a vacation, and then savoring again can take words, whether it's looking at photos or making a photo book or writing down, reviewing your journal, whatever it might be. Savoring is closely related to expressing gratitude. There's a concept of the hedonic treadmill, and psychologists talk about eudaimonic. It's a Greek word, eudaimonic happiness versus hedonic happiness. And the difference is that the hedonic treadmill, the hedonic happiness, assuming where you desire to have or do something, you strive for it, you obtain it, you enjoy it, and then you adapt to having it, and then you want something more. And whether that's you get a beautiful car, and after a couple of years, and it's the car that you drive to work, it no longer gives you that same excitement, and you start looking for the next new car or house or whatever it might be. So recognizing that you're on a treadmill meaning that you're working hard but not going anywhere. So that's hedonic adaptation. Eudaimonia, the Greek idea of eudaimonia, is the happiness, the well-being that comes from pursuing life as your best self, pursuing your virtues, living as an authentic human being. And think back to the PERMA idea that Seligman talks about in terms of relationships and flow in what you're doing and meaning and a sense of accomplishment and vitality. Satisficing, which is actually a word, at least in psychology, satisficing versus maximizing is the idea of recognizing that you cannot maximize in every area of life. And Professor Barry Schwartz talks about the paradox of choice. The more choices you have, the more it undermines your well-being, your subjective well-being. Trying to search through the best available, all of the available options and find the best choice in every decision you make undermines your well-being, whether it's something you're buying, whether it's where you want to live, whether it's the clothing, whether it's the, you could pick any decision that's on your list. You can actually be happier if you decide which of those you're willing to satisfice on. Maybe you're not going to get the ideal, but is it really worth it? Will it make a big difference to you? Maybe there are some decisions on your plate right now that you can decide, I'm just going to satisfice. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. We talked a little bit about this, investing in time, health, vitality. The way you invest in time is you might pay others to do things that you don't want to do, or that you're not so good at. Investing in health, I would add education, vitality. Those are things that drive well-being. Investing in exercise and health promote happiness. And that's the V in the PERMA V construct. Very well-researched concept is the idea of spending money on experiences, not stuff. So if you can prioritize experiences over objects and invest in memorable experience, the research shows those produce longer boosts in well-being. And I'll give you a moment. I think you can find me on the river here in Jackson, Wyoming, on the Snake River. I'm back there on the right, investing in my experience of almost getting tossed out of the whitewater raft. Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, and we make a life by what we give. And that the research shows that being generous with your money and time also boosts well-being and happiness. Spending on others makes us happier. These are all research findings. Spending money on others makes us happier than spending on ourselves. Happier people tend to give more. Giving makes people happier. Generosity actually reduces the risk of dying. And in terms of giving time, people who volunteer feel physically healthier. It improves their mood. It reduces stress. And people feel greater satisfaction with life, and also spending on others and giving to others fosters social connection. So be generous. One of the most generous people in our time, Mackenzie Scott, formerly Bezos, says generosity engages the same pleasure centers in the brain as sex, food, and receiving gifts. It improves our health and long-term happiness. So just more information on how doing for others can benefit us. So it's not just giving of your money, but giving of your time. And these are all bullet points from research study findings available. I'm happy to provide any of the research anybody's interested in digging deeply into. And then the last one on my list is gets back to the issue of the taboo around talking about money. Don't wait to discuss money and wealth with your spouse and children. There are good ways to do that, maybe not so good ways to do it, but it turns out that even the not so good ways are more beneficial than not doing it at all. So break the money taboo. This is from a separate presentation I give on talking about family money. But there are, I would say the one to highlight on this list is number 7. It turns out a really important best practice is having facilitated family meetings to talk about money. Can be more effective, not instead of, but in addition to family conversations around the table. So just to recap that equation, money plus what equals happiness? Well, we've hit 11 of these. Take control of your financial behavior. Don't compare yourself to others. Invest in meaning and purpose. Express gratitude. Recognize when you're on the hedonic treadmill and try to step off of it. Look for ways to satisfy in your decision-making. Invest in time, health, and vitality. Look for ways to spend on experiences. Be generous. Do things for other people, and don't wait to discuss wealth and money with your family. Here's a little bonus on as we approach the holiday season. I like acronyms, so putting a few of these into the acronym MONEY. Think about the M. What's the most meaningful gift that you can give? Maybe you can give a gift to somebody as you're thinking about the holidays, a gift that will help someone pursue their purpose or their passion. Think about how to invest in others by being generous, as opposed to buying things for yourself. Notice what you're grateful for. Take time out to practice gratitude. And how can you express your gratitude to others? What experiences can you gift? I just recently saw something in the press about a whole list of ways to gift experiences as opposed to stuff, and give and spend in your way. Don't fall prey to the social comparison, and take joy in being a giver, whatever that looks like to you. So I know we're coming up on 10:02, so we will have a few minutes for Q&A, but I'm wondering, back to Mentimeter. So we hit some highlights in those 11 strategies, and I'm wondering, as you think about your own wealth and how to be happy with it, how to enjoy it, which and as you look at these, if you can rate them as they relate to you, which do you think would be effective in boosting your own health and well-being? Maybe one of these or a few of these stand out as strategies you could start implementing sooner rather than later. They're all research-based. They're all grounded in, in empirical learning. So, and as I said, I'm more than happy to give you more information on any one of these if you're interested. So I'm just looking at this, and I'd encourage you keep going in responding, but I'm seeing it's actually a pretty even horse race, which is not a bad thing. I think looks like we've got pursuing meaning, passion, and purpose, and investing in time, health, and vitality, and spending experiences. Those look like our leaders at the moment. So please do keep sharing your responses to that. And I'm just going to move on to the next sort of recap. I'm curious, when you've completed your 4A responses, I'd love your thoughts on what insights from this. I know this was fast. I feel like I spoke really fast, and I apologize. But if there was a phrase or a word that you've taken away from this that is especially memorable, meaningful for you, I'd love to see what you'll take away from the last 45, 50 minutes together.
Well, thank you, Joel. It's given everyone, I think, a lot to think about. We do have some questions that came in while you were speaking, and I thought maybe we could address a few of those. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we have a question, and I think this is a really good one. Might it be that most families are uncomfortable talking about wealth and or thinking it taboo because, in part, by not knowing how to do so in a constructive way without impacting productivity and purpose? So really, people feel like they don't have the tools to have these conversations.
I think it's a great question. And I think it's one of a number of reasons people don't have those conversations. If you haven't grown up with it, it's hard to know how to have that conversation. And I think we sometimes, we make decisions. There's this isn't my experience, but I read it somewhere. In families of wealth and affluence, a lot of decisions get made outside the view of children. And if you think about a family that might not have a lot of money, if a discussion about buying a new car is needs to happen between mom and dad, that may happen at a dinner table where the discussion is, should we get the nicer car and forego the family vacation? We were going to repaint the house, but maybe, we should delay the vacation, or, maybe we should go for the less expensive car in order to replace the couch, whatever it might be. In a family where there are enough assets to do this without really thinking and talking about it, children might be driven to school in the BMW and picked up in the new Mercedes at the end of the day. And a decision was made somewhere along the way, and that the children had no idea about the trade-offs and the conversations that may or may not have happened. And sometimes it's we as parents don't even realize that we have missed a teachable moment. And that's one of the reasons I think having a safe space, back to that money and emotion concentric circle, I think that there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes with money. We all grew up with, whatever our parents' feelings and behaviors about money may have been. And I think in many cases, it's made us less comfortable or maybe, normalize certain behaviors that because we don't talk about money oftentimes with friends, we also don't, there aren't usually, in my experience, conversations that sound like, so Bob, how did you talk about inheritance with your kids? Like these things are not, cocktail party conversations for most people, which goes back to I think the best practice of having a family meeting take place on a regular basis where you have a facilitator who can be objective, who has the tools and the knowledge to listen for those hot buttons, those emotional areas, and bring the conversation back to productive exchange and learning for all generations. The other thing, and this wasn't part of that question, but I think sometimes people avoid the money conversations with all the best of intentions. I'll never forget one of the Tiger 21 members in a meeting. His daughter was getting married, and someone said, and this was an extremely wealthy family. This was a billionaire family. And someone said, and they lived very, down to earth lives. Somebody said, well, how much does your daughter and your future son-in-law, how much do they know about the family wealth? And he said, well, they know what we sold the business for because it was in the newspapers. But between us chickens, I told them we lost most of it in 2008. And the idea, understandably, the idea in his head was, we don't want to saddle them with all of that pressure and the stress of the money and how's it invested, and, are they going to have to take time out from their careers? And so he basically lied to them. And, it led to a great conversation where people said, but, the unintended consequence of not sharing this is that you're missing the opportunity to prepare them, to teach them, to introduce them to the people who are your advisors, to share your values, to talk about what the money means to you. So I think sometimes it's, even with the best of intentions, not having the knowledge on how to do it the right way, but sometimes it's the unintended consequence of having the best of intentions and not realizing that that protecting our kids can also stymie them.
Yeah. So I'm hearing start early in age-appropriate levels and honesty. So if you don't have the professional skills, everyone can do that. And sort of leading into that, well, we had a question on, how early should you begin talking to children? So I guess your answer would be as early as possible.
Yeah, just to add on to that, taking a look at the highlights of this presentation and thinking about where could you inject some of these concepts into your conversations with your own kids. It might be, hey, what are you looking at on social media? Oh, here's a 18-year-old who's driving a Ferrari. What do you think of that? I know, you're driving a Honda, how does that feel? I think understanding how to use this knowledge to, not in a heavy-handed way, but just to realize that you have an opportunity to use these as tools in conversation, take that teachable moment, when you're talking about, hey, I'm driving a car. I've had it for 9 years. I like it. Guess what? I know the neighbors are, around us are getting new cars. I'm actually pretty happy with, I don't feel like I need to get a new car. It's a great car, can lead to a discussion of, you don't have to say hedonic treadmill, but you can say you don't always have to be looking for the newest, best, shiniest thing to get. You can appreciate what you've got. Or, the experience stuff, I know for the holidays, you want this new, thing, but I'd rather take you on a really cool vacation, the two of us. And so I think you can put these into place in conversation and be a role model in a mindful way.
Well, thank you. It's 2:00 now, so I just want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you for your answers to that last question about what you'd like to hear from next. And, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to continue the conversation with Joel. This slide has Joel's contact information. You can reach out with any follow-up questions to Joel directly, or to anybody at the firm, and we'll be happy to pass on questions to Joel. And I want to thank everybody for your time, and thank you, Joel, for your insights today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And I will set that there's a setting in the Mentimeter which will allow you to go back and finish completing any input if you didn't already. I'll make sure that that's accessible so you can go back and view the slides and add any answers, topics of interest. But thank you for playing the Mentimeter game, and I look forward to hearing from you if you want to continue the conversation about family finance and flourishing.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.